Okay. So for our fishbowl, I'm gonna just choose 3 names at random. Remember, you have 1 time to decline and say, I'm not prepared. You will not be penalized or marked off, but that's your 1 time. So next time that you're called on, you are gonna be expected to participate in the fishbowl. I'm gonna give 3 questions to discuss. You could jump into those questions, or again, you could just discuss whatever you so choose. It's totally up to you. You are the facilitator of the conversation. Again, once you 3 have gone through your analysis or whatever you want to say, the rest of the class is expected to kind of chime in as well and make it more of a group conversation. It will be about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll go into some breakout groups. So the 3 people will be Emily, Diana, and Cassandra. Does anybody need to pass, or is everybody okay with fishbowling out of those 3?
Yeah, I need to pass. I kind of got your class and somebody else's class mixed up. And I thought I was supposed to read theirs and, oh, okay, never mind. But yeah, I need to pass. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Can I pass too?
I'm sorry, I was looking away. Who was it?
Me, Diana.
Diana, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe, because did I call you Cassandra? Were you the 3rd person? And you're okay with going? Okay, let me write that down. So yours is done for the semester. Eileen, how do you feel about fishbowling today?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Seems good. And Ingrid, how do you feel about fishbowling? Ingrid, you with us? She might be having some technical. Do me a favor, Ingrid, if you can, just type something so we know that you're with us. Okay, your mic's not working. Understand, thank you. Cecilia, how do you feel about fishbowling?
I'm okay with it. I think it's
Cool. So those will be our 3. Eileen, Cassandra, and Cecilia, this is really your last fishbowl for the semester. I think we're just doing 1 per semester. But at this point, I will pose you guys 3 questions. You do not have to use those questions. You can talk about whatever you like. It's totally up to you. Question 1, what did the reading make you feel? Right? Like what was an emotional response that you had from the reading, right? 2, and I'm gonna kind of preface number 2. I wouldn't say that there's a thesis or an argument in these readings, right? But there is a method, right? A way that the author went about getting you to understand what they're trying to say. What do you think about the method? Do you think that it's effective? Did it work for you? Or did you think it was not effective, right? So 1, how did the reading make you feel? 2, how did the method or the style of the writing, do you find that method to be effective or ineffective? And then 3, what did the readings make you think about the people who wrote it? So 1, how did the readings make you feel? What type of emotional response or emotional affect was produced from the readings? 2 was how was the method? Was the method effective or was it ineffective? The style of the writing. And then 3, what did you think about the people who produced this writing? So again, you guys don't have to use those questions. Those are just some things to think about if you don't have nothing to start off with. I'm gonna put myself on mute and it's totally up to you guys. If you want, I could type the questions in the chat as well.
do we all answer or like in whatever order? It doesn't matter.
At this point, is Cassandra, Eileen, and Cecilia, y'all the professors. So however you guys want to go with that, it's totally up to you.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So I want to answer the first question you posed, which was, what did the reading make you feel? So it was from the section about Hillard's teaching of, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled Ptahholep. And I think it was either the second like paragraph where where the person said, love for the work which they do brings men closer to God. So for that stood out for me because it's talking like, for me, how I interpreted it that it was talking about how people who like work and like love their work, and it's like a form to bring you closer to God. That's how I was interpreting it. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think.
Can I go next? I was gonna talk about the comedic proverbs. I really liked how it was talking about how like every parent teaches as they act. They will speak to the children so that they will speak to their children. They will set an example and not give offense. I really liked how they talked about that because it really shows how like they learn what they teach, I guess. So it really like stood out to me because you can really tell how like somebody's personality is just on how their parents are. So I feel like that really stood out. Also, I the Hillard teachings that I'll answer the first question. Or okay, I'll answer the first question. It made me feel, and it like I guess it made me connect. I don't want to say like it was similar, but it made me feel like if I was like reading the Bible because it was like a teaching. It was like telling us like all these like if you see a man like let him be and he's working, just do you like just leave him, let him be. And then if you like about friends, to honor your friends, to respect your friends. And I don't know, when I read it, I felt like I was reading a Bible, but like without the lies and without the stuff. Like it felt very powerful.
I agree with you. That's exactly what I wrote down in my notes too.
Yeah, so did I.
So at this point, you guys provided your contribution, right? That's essentially what the fishbowl is. But now everyone else is welcome to join the conversation, right? You could either answer those three questions, or you could just talk about anything that you felt, spoke to you within the reading. One thing I do want to say before I open up that floor in regards to which Cecilia was saying, and Eileen and Cassandra's notes in regards to it relating to the Bible. Quite literally, the book of Proverbs, this is what the teaching of Ptahhotep is, where the book of Proverbs gets their information from, their style from, right? So the reason it feels like you're reading the Bible is because you're reading the original Bible, right? Not to get too much into history and to get too much into Afrocentric theory and Afrocentric history, but there is a school of thought which I ascribe and I believe, and it's a lot of evidence that supports, that says essentially when Kemet was conquered, or when Egypt was conquered, the hieroglyphics, or the Neter Netur, was replicated and attempted to be interpreted and reproduced in scripts like the Bible, right? So essentially, when you have things like the Bible, is Europeans' interpretations of things that African people did, of African spiritual systems, right? So that's why this seems very eerily similar to the Bible. And when we get into the lecture, that will become a little bit more elucidated. So at this point, man, what were other people's thoughts about the readings? What did other people find interesting or think about?
Well, I felt like I had like, after reading it, I felt like there was a path that was laid out by Ptahhotep, and it's not that hard of a path, but it's talking about good and evil, I think in the
You put yourself on mute, Aaron. Yeah.
oh sorry in his 20th one, it was talking about the greediness and the division of things, and it was talking about like don't be greedy for like and the evil are greedy. It was just like laying out very diverse, or not diverse, that's not a good word, very like obvious, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
paths which will take you down greatness and
Yeah.
evilness.
Yeah. If you guys don't mind, I'll read that that passage that he's talking about. Do not be greedy in the division of things. Do not covet more than your share. Do not be greedy towards your relatives. A mild person has a greater claim than the harsh one. Poor is the person who forgets his relatives. He is deprived of their company. Even a little bit of what is wanted will turn a quarreler into a friendly person, right? So it's really a meditation on giving, right? It's a meditation on hoarding and really about relationships with family, right? And in a sense, what Ptah is arguing, right? The communion and the relation with family is greater than any things that you could hoard, any material things, right? So, Aaron, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, yeah.
No, bro,
His
tell me how to pronounce the name. I want to be right.
Arion.
Erion. Okay, I'm gonna try the best that I can with the little accent. You know what I mean? But now, I mean, my name is Amiri, bro. So people fuck my name up all the time. So I want to make sure that you know what I mean. I get it right. But Arion is exactly right. You know what I mean? That he lays out a path and is a very clear path as to what greed can lead to and what putting your relations and your families first can lead to, right? So that's a very astute observation. Anyone else?
Relating to like how they were talking about, it reminds them of the Bible. When I was reading it, it kind of reminded me of like the Ten Commandments, just of course, like, you know, more. Because like it was talking about loving your neighbors and that your neighbors are like a memorial of you. And then it also talked about if you see a woman who's like joyful and stuff, like let her eat with you or something, because like, you know, the joy is good. And I don't know, just a lot of it reminded me of the Ten.
And when we get into next week's reading, the Ma'at, the moral theory of Ma'at, that is exactly where the Ten Commandments derive from. So it's 42 principles and 42 laws and 42 confessions of Ma'at, and you'll familiarize yourself with that when you read next week. But of those 42, they produce the Ten Commandments. So you guys, like what you guys are thinking about really is foreshadowing. It's showing me that you're engaging the readings very critically. When I talk about the analysis, right? So I say it's the thesis, it's the analysis, and how that relates to contemporary times when you do your journals, right? What you're doing now by saying, this reminds me of the Bible, that's analysis. That's perfect depiction of what an analysis is. So continue with that frame of reference. Who else has a thought or response about the readings, either the Proverbs or the teaching of Ptah?
Can I add on to the teaching of the like one thing I found kind of interesting was number 10. If you are poor, then you serve a wealthy person. And it was kind of like you don't bring up that they were poor. You just kind of respect them. And I thought that was like really interesting because it's always like, I guess poor people kind of always have to serve rich people in a way, because like less fortunate have to serve people. And I feel like that connected to today, like rich people get like, if they want this fruit or something, there's always the farm workers like that have to work out in the sun. So it's kind of like the poor serving the wealthy. So I thought that was like a connection to today.
Absolutely. And then think about, with that being said, how do the wealthy treat the poor today, right? It's a far reality from what Ptah is kind of affirming the way that we should treat them, you know? Who else? Nobody else has a thought?
I actually wanted to add on to that because, like, in that passage, number 10, it says if you are poor, then serve a person of worth, like a wealthy person. But it also says to respect him for his position and authority, and that really confused me. And like, I don't really get it. Like, why would?
Let's read the whole passage, okay? If you are poor, then serve a person of worth, so that your conduct may be well with God. do not bring up the fact that he was once poor. Do not bring up the fact that he was once poor. So it sounds like that passage to me, as I read it, right, this is an instruction to the poor person. So don't bring up the fact that the rich person that you work for was once poor, okay? Do not be arrogant towards him just because you know about his former state. So again, don't tout your worth because you know about how he was. Respect him now for his position of authority. As for fortune, it obeys its own law, and that it is her will. So as for fortune, it obeys its own law, and that is her will. So fortune, right? Who inherit wealth? That has its own law, right? And it has its own will. So we cannot judge the rich person for formerly being poor, right? So this is where we're at so far. It is God's gift. So wealth, essentially, fortune is a gift from God. It is God who makes him worthy and who protects him while he sleeps or can turn away from him. So essentially, in my interpretation of this, right, it's saying give respect to the wealthy person that you work for because God has blessed them with that situation, right? Even though you know that prior to God blessing them with that wealth, that they were poor just like you, don't bring up and don't disrespect them because of their former state, because who brought them out of their former state is God, right? Hence, what does it say? As for fortune, it obeys its own law, and that is her will. It is a gift of God, right? So who gets that wealthy, according to Ptah-hotep, is ordained by a divine principle, by God, essentially. That's who's going to determine who gets wealth. Christopher, does that answer your question a little bit more?
Yeah, that actually it makes you help. It helps me understand. I get it now. I understand the interpretation.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too that we have to understand that, so there's a thing called temporal, right? Temporal just means time. So we should also apply a temporal analysis to this, right? So from the way that Ptah-hotep is articulating wealth is from the standpoint of a divine ordination. So God gives you the wealth, right? That's then. Now we know that wealth stems from plundering, capitalism, right? Conquering, destruction, and death. So is from a temporal analysis, we know what Ptah-hotep was talking about at that time is vastly different from what's going on now, right? So if we were to look at what he's saying from the standpoint of how wealth is accumulated now, it wouldn't make sense. But if we look at it from then, it makes a little bit more sense, right? Let's get one more comment and then we can move on to the remainder of class.
I just want to say I found number 17 like super interesting because like this is the first book in the world, right? So it's saying that like if you're a person who judges, then when somebody comes before you like guilty of a crime or something, that you hear them out. So they were saying like innocent till proven guilty, like, you know, give them a fair trial and stuff and hear them out, because when they're in distress, like they're gonna pour their heart out and tell you the truth and stuff. And I just think that's interesting because like we went through a period of time where like, you know, like if you did a crime, if you like stole a piece of bread, they're gonna like behead you or something, like, you know. So I just think it's interesting that being the first book in the, as this being the first book in the world, like they still had that sense of morality of like, you know, guilty or innocent until proven guilty, or, you know.
No, absolutely. And then so to tie this into the first comment that I kind of start off the class with, the brother who was killed in South LA yesterday, right? And you think about all of these police killings. By definition, the police are supposed to put you in jail until you're able to face a trial, right? The trial is supposed to determine what your fate is, right? If you get the death penalty, right? And really, in majority of the states, the death penalty is illegal. So think about this, right? So what police are now doing are coming to the scene and determining and really enforcing the death penalty without any due process, without a jury of their peers to determine the crime, without even a judge to determine who is guilty and what not, right? So when you talk about things like police reform, we have to really understand that the police are operating in a way that is unconstitutional. Even if they did a crime, and oftentimes what happens is the murder of these people are justified by the fact that they did something illegal, right? Illegality does not justify your death. And the first book in the world are telling you, you have to give them the time to explain themselves, right? One, to be able to give someone time to explain themselves, you have to approach a scene with a rational state of mind, right? You have to be in a position, in a disposition that allows you to listen with levity, right? The way that these police officers come onto a scene is far from controlled, right? It's reckless. So I think that's a very astute observation in the sense of the oldest book in the world is telling you how to perform these type of duties, right? So how do we get to a point to where we're so separated from that? It also leads to, I believe, question number 3, and question number 3 also leads to the breakout question. So what I would like to do, if it's okay with you guys, think about question number 3, right? So question number 3, essentially, what did the readings make you think about the people who wrote it? Ponder that for a moment. And I would like a couple of responses, man. Like, what did you guys think about essentially Ptah-hotep, right? The culture that produced Ptah-hotep, right? The society that Ptah-hotep is existing in. What does that mean to you? What, if you were to put those thoughts together, what resonates?
Honestly, I feel like he had, like, you know, a good idea of how to raise his children, or like, you know, how to run a community, because like a lot of the rules are like morally right and there's nothing wrong with them, but some of them is like some questionable, like when it's saying that you have to, like, you can only follow this, like, you know, these teachings in order to live long and stuff, like, you know, like some of his ideologies are like old, but you could tell like where he was coming from. Essentially, it was, you know, in good faith, and like he was just trying to do what was best for his people.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I agree with her, because like there's like some parts where it's like, okay, that would have to change in modern time, I guess, but it is like in good faith, like how he talks about if you go to somebody's house, you don't greet the host until they talk to you. I feel like now that's considered rude, like you always kind of greet the host, but it was in good faith, like he had good intentions.
Anybody else?
Yeah, and oh, my bad.
Sorry,
You want
it's
to go?
okay. You can go. That's fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. To add on to that, like they have old ideologies. Like I don't think they had democracy, did they? I'm not so sure. But there was another one in 31 where they say like wretched is he who opposes his leader. And right now, like the time we live in right now is like kind of split through the nation. Like I would say about half the nation opposes our leader and the other half doesn't, as it is an old ideology, because they had a pharaoh who was essentially a god. So
right. And I think, and that's why I kind of did the half as far as the democracy. It was more of a, it was kind of a blending of a spiritual order along with a political order, right? So the separation of church and state was not the case in ancient Kemet. It was intertwined, right? So if you think about it from that context, and if you think about how religion frames people who go against religion, right, they'll send your ass to hell, right? So it's really no different from calling somebody wretched, right? If you think about it from that concept. So that's why the temporal analysis, as far as judging it from the time that it was written, is important, you know, because again, to Ariane's point, is like, shit, in this society, you dumb as hell if you're not opposing the leader, right? But the leader is not upright. The leader is not righteous, right? The leader is not a god, right? Although he may think so, but that's not the case. So even in ancient Kemet, there was a certain stature and certain things that you had to go through and do to become qualified as a god, right? So you earn that title. So that's why I kind of problematize the notion of democracy as it pertains to ancient Kemet. But that's a really dope, that's being critical, Ariane, like the way you're looking at it. And also being able to bring your understanding of that time into the way that you're reading this, right? That's what scholars should do. I think Cecilia, you were gonna say something?
Yes, I was just gonna add on that what I think what was the question? I can't remember.
How did the readings make you think about the people or the culture that produced the reading?
Okay. What I think about the people who wrote it or who like got together or like him, it depends because I don't know, no one's really sure. That I think they were very like powerful spiritually, and they're very wise to write this down, to say like, well, this is what I'm gonna teach everyone else. Like this is what I'm gonna teach my people. I'm gonna bring this out, and everybody's gonna learn this. And I think that's very like open-minded. It's very intelligent of them to think, oh, let me write this down and let me share it with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is what we're going to kind of break out to. We're going to go into breakout groups. It's really one question. And you if you think about it, you have the answer to the question, but as if you think about it. So raise your hand, nod your head, give me a thumbs up or something if you heard of Alexander the Great. Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay. Socrates, Plato, Hippocrates. Okay. So now this is the question, this is the task. Think of, don't answer it now. I'm gonna break you out into breakout groups, and this is what you'll discuss. Think about an African individual of importance or significance prior to European contact. So an African individual, man or woman, of significance or importance prior to European contact. So before Africans and Europeans came together, somebody who was important of African influence. Does everybody understand the question? Not necessarily have an answer for the question, but does everyone understand the question?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so I'm gonna break you guys up into breakout groups, discuss that, and then we'll come back and have a conversation as a whole. Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fine. Oh, it's low. Yeah. I'm not there. There we go. Is everybody back? Oh, we have more than that. I want to say it's like 18. Okay, I think we're good. So what did anybody come up with an answer?
Well, my group went over like European contact was actually like what like would you say it was like 1800s, 1700s? What would you say?
It goes back before the 1800s. Because you got to think, right? They say enslavement started in 1619. Some have scholars have traced that back even to the 1550s. So European contact was like way before even that time.
So like we went over like 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 Egypt because that was part like necessarily part of Africa and like they recorded a lot of like ancient stuff. And
I'm gonna say that one more time. Egypt was what?
Egypt was really important and they recorded a lot of things from like ancient Africa or I forgot the word. How do you say Egypt with the K? I mean Africa with the K. It's
It sounds the same, man. Africa.
Okay.
Yeah, I just spell it with the K. But see, the ancient term for Egypt is Kemet.
Oh, Kemet. That's what I meant. Kemet.
Yeah, okay, Kemet. Yeah. So yeah, so you're kind of onto something, right? So even during ancient Kemet, there was European contact, right? What they would call the Hyksos tried to invade ancient Kemet. So even during those times, there was contact with Europeans. So the question is, even prior and before that, who was somebody of significance? Anybody else come up with any answers? Go ahead, Lisa. You was gonna say something.
No.
No, I think you kind of tricked us.
Well,
oh,
Ptahhotep, right? So if it's the oldest book in the world, that's somebody before European contact. But look, I'm gonna tell you like this, man. Every time I do a lecture, every time I present a presentation, I've been to like the Conference for National Black Studies, right? So everyone who studies Pan-African studies, Africana studies, Egyptology, anything of that nature, I ask that question, and seldom does anybody have an answer, right? But if you think about it, you know Napoleon, you know Socrates, you know Plato, you know all of these European individuals, but you know no one of African descent. That's problematic, right? That's a problem. Eileen, were you gonna say something?
Me and my group say Cleopatra. She's like one of the most known ones.
Cleopatra. But yes, yes. But then what made Cleopatra famous was her connections with Rome, right? So
Oh,
she had contact with Europeans.
And I thought she wasn't fully like from Kemet. I thought she was half Roman.
That's
Wasn't
what they
she?
say. I mean, there's a movie with her being completely white, played by Elizabeth Taylor, so you can't really believe everything that they say. But what the story is, she took her empire, her Kemetic empire, into Rome, and she married, right? So it's not that she herself was mixed. It's just that she merged the empires.
Ah, okay, okay. I think that's what I read somewhere. I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, to some degree, it's just more so bringing those two empires together. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna jump into a lecture with the time that we have to kind of give you a greater understanding of these African people. We may have to pick this up next week just because it's about 15 minutes left, but let me see what I can do with the time left, okay?
Do we take notes while you lecture? Or like, do
Yeah,
you want us to? Okay.
it would be a good idea because I mean, this is information that you will be expected to know. So whatever process that you have to kind of make sure you understand, I would do that. For me as a student, always engage in the conversation, help me remember information. But if you're a note taker, take notes. Another thing, because I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see everyone. So if you need to stop me or you have a question, just blurt out the question. I'm not going to trip. All right. So it's the title page, kind of get through this so we can save some time. So these are important. We're going to go through a series of what are called theoretical frameworks. A theoretical framework is something that's going to help you explain a theory or help you understand a frame of thought, right? So this theory is African American male theory. Now, this is a theory produced by the chair of the Pan-African Studies Department, Dr. Nana Lawson Bush. The bullet point is a tenet of the theory, right? So there's 6 tenets. This is one of the 6 tenets. African-American boys and men, I include women as well, are resilient and resistant. African-American male theory posits that African-American boys and men and women are born with an innate desire for self-determination and with an unlimited capacity for morality and intelligence, right? So this theory says that African people are born with an innate desire for self-determination and with an unlimited capacity for morality and intelligence. So that is the theoretical framework that this lecture and really this semester will be working through. So for those who are Bible readers and Bible believers, I grew up in a Christian home. I myself would not say I'm Christian, but if you're familiar with the book of Genesis, then this should sound familiar, right? Let us make man in our image after our likeness, right? So I would interpret that as God saying, when I created the being called man or human beings, right? I shaped them in my likeness. They were designed to look like me, right? Just as you have offspring, you have a child, the child will look like you, right? So here we have an image of Amun, the great unknown, as he was called in ancient Kemet, which is like the formless hand that's shaping the African man and the African woman. So these are the actual remains of the first human ancestor or the first being found on the planet, right? The name is Abiomi. That being and those remains and those bones were found in Africa. Henceforth, and y'all can debate me or argue with me if you like, the first people on the planet are African people, right? So keep in mind the first slide, let me make man in my image and our likeness. So by default, by historical evidence, the first people on the planet are African people. So now we're gonna look at this idea of migration and evolution, right? So we know we have Abiomi, the first remains on the planet, right? Then they uncovered Lucy. That was about 3.2 million years ago. That was found in Ethiopia. The older bones that are in parentheses, that is Abiomi. they've actually found remains in the Congo. So I need to update this lecture, but they actually found remains in the Congo that could be traced back to 8 million years old. So you could say African people can be traced back 8 million years old as their existence on the planet, right? So modern human, Homo sapien as we know them, they could be traced back originally 200,000 years in East Africa, but updated information says about 340,000 years in Cameroon, right? First African migration. So Africans leaving Africa in large numbers can be traced back around 60,000 years ago. The first modern European, so European people coming onto the planet, coming into existence, can be traced back 30,000 years ago. So Africans can be traced back 8 million years. The Homo sapiens, as we understand them and know them, could be traced back 340 years. That's in Cameroon. African migration outside of Africa can be traced back 60,000 years. And then the arrival of the European is 30,000 years. So this kind of give you a physical representation. So the initial brown, the lighter brown, right? That's the first Africans touching down. The darker green is the Homo sapiens touching down. The movement out of Africa, that's the like yellow dot. The European presence is this very small brown dot. So when you think about the question I posed to you, right? Who is the first person, sorry, who is a significant being prior to European contact? We have 8 million years of history, right? And only 30,000 where we have contact with Europeans. How is it that we don't know this enormous amount of time where we were not in contact with these European individuals? Who are those people? You know, what was going on during that time? So let's kind of get into that. So this is one of the individuals. Just kind of give you some time to take that image in. So this is Narmer. He was an ancient Kemetic pharaoh of the early dynastic period. They would consider him the unifier of Kemet. And when they say unifier, he was able to bring together upper and lower Kemet, essentially northern and southern Kemet, and make it into one empire. He was the founder of the first dynasty, therefore the first pharaoh of unified Kemet. So this brother here, we owe so much to him. Who, real quick, it's got to be done. I know we're limited on time, but it's important. Who has heard of Hippocrates? Okay. Who has, so when you go into medicine and you become a doctor, you take what's called the Hippocratic Oath, right? The Hippocratic Oath is derived from Hippocrates. Hippocrates is a Greek philosopher who is ascribed to be the father of medicine, okay? When you understand Greek history and Greek culture, even in Greek folklore, they'll tell you to be considered educated, to be considered learned, you had to spend a minimum of 7 years in Kemet, in their mystery schools, right? So Hippocrates, Plato, all these great philosophers that the modern world is shaped after had to come to Kemet to learn under their teachers for a minimal of 7 years, right? So the individual who I was getting into, Imhotep, is one of the individuals that Hippocrates had to study under, right? So this is the true father of medicine. He's the world's first multi-genius, the world's first architect, first physician, and first engineer. He built the first pyramids and is the architect of the step pyramid. He's also recognized as a priest, sage, poet, scribe, and astrologer. As a physician, diagnosed and treated over 200 diseases, 15 diseases of the abdomen, 11 of the bladder, 10 of the rectum, 29 of the eyes, and 18 of the skin, nails, and tongue. He also performed surgeries and practiced some dentistry. All of this occurred 2,200 years before the Western father of medicine, Hippocrates. was born. Now, he did this before Hippocrates was even born, okay? So in the West, we recognize Hippocrates as a father of medicine, but this brother Imhotep did all of this 2,200 years before Hippocrates even walked the planet. About 100 years after his death, he was elevated to a medical demigod and later into a full god some 2,000 years after his death. He was also worshipped by the early Christians as either the first Christ or as one with Christ. So remember when I said that you had to do certain things to earn that God status? Think about all the things that they just riddled off about the accomplishments of Imhotep, right? So if you earn this title of God, there was nothing to sneeze or laugh at. You've done a tremendous amount of work, right? So if you think about if Hippocrates was able to do this 2,200 years before, if Imhotep was able to do this 2,200 years before Hippocrates, but in the West, we recognize Hippocrates as the father of medicine, taking the Hippocratic oath. What does that stand on? What is the basis of that? That does not make sense. That, in fact, is hypocrisy, right? That is exactly the definition of hypocrisy. But this is how the West and Eurocentric thinking has confused reality.
So like essentially they're like erasing his like existence and his accomplishments and stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, and what's funny, let me go back to y'all.
Wait, can I like mention something?
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna go back when we just have this conversation.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So I took a medical class this past year, my senior year, and nowhere when we were learning about like, you know, the history of medicine, nowhere like we did not learn nothing about what we just learned about right now. All we learned about was the other man, what was his name?
Hippocrates.
Yeah, him. And that was like the one who we did the study on, like, because he was the father who essentially known to people that invented medicine.
Yeah.
So like I think that was kind of like disrespectful towards him because they did not give him credit whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure many people don't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about how important copyright infringement and plagiarism is in college, right? And how that will get you kicked out of college. I mean, this is like the most egregious example of copyright infringement, right? Like this is, and it's an example of colonizing education. Does everybody understand the concept of colonization? Because I'm gonna use it a lot, and I wanna make sure that we have a very comprehensive understanding. So most of y'all say, yeah, cool. But yeah, this is a keen example of the colonization of information and education in what's called epistemology. Epistemology is how you understand knowledge. So how we know what we know, epistemology. And then those are who, like in philosophy, though, you should be a little bit more familiar with that. But this is also a colonization of epistemology, right? And it just speaks to this idea or this notion that white people have to be the creators and the founders of everything, right? This is no different than saying Christopher Columbus founded America when there were people on this continent, right? So we have to be very critical and understand too, man, like our school system ain't shit in regards to telling us the truth, right? Just to put it as bluntly as I can, right? And a lot of the reasons why we have these issues that we have and we're such a polarized and a divided country is because of the ineffectiveness of the school system to tell the truth, right? It's gonna be very hard to tell somebody who's indigenous to this country to go back to your country when in fact you know that you are the true immigrant of this country, talking about white people, right? If you have a true sense of history, a lot of that shit sounds hella foolish, right? How you sound, right? Even for them to tell African people to go back to Africa. If you know history, you would know that African people were on this continent 200 years prior to Columbus, right? So the ineffective telling of history causes a lot of the foolishness that we're dealing with in today, right? So we're going to kind of open it up for any question that you guys may have in the last 5 to 10 minutes, and then yeah, we'll close it out. I wanted to get a little bit more deeper into that conversation, so we'll probably pick up on this a little bit more next week, and then I'll engage the Ma'at readings. But any last minute comments, questions, concerns, thoughts? Was I tripping? Think I'm lying? Tell me.
I want to say, you go first. Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay.
There's like three of us. Okay.
Let's do this.
Go.
Go ahead. We'll go Emily, Cassandra, Cecilia.
Okay, so the questions that you ask them, like for the reading, is that going to be for every reading?
There'll be different questions.
Oh, it'll be different? Okay. And also, like, are we able to, like, volunteer? Like, when you ask, like, oh, the fishbowl?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, I wanted to go back to what you were saying about Columbus and stuff. So when you broke us out to the breakout room, I was talking with Lisette. I don't know if I said her name right, but I was talking to her, and we were trying to just like figure out how to answer the question. But we both said that usually from like the time we went to school up until maybe before high school, we learned so much about like Christopher Columbus and how he was such a great person and how he discovered America, etc. And it wasn't until then we were older we figured out that he wasn't that such a great of a guy. And like referring back to what you said, like that's how basically our education and the information that we received when we were younger, like that's how it's always been. And I really hope that as time progresses, it stops being like that.
Just real quick on that, and then we'll get to Cecilia. Here's the thing, right? The reason that it will stop being like that, Cassandra, is if people like yourselves use your education to disrupt the system, right? That's the only way that it's going to stop, right? So how this works, right? Just like me, I got a hold of some real information. I use my skills and my talents to position myself as a professor. Now I'm able to teach the truth, right? So there's a disruption in the system, in the way that they want the system to operate. So I would task you guys to do the same thing, right? So whatever you want to do, right? Do it at the space and at the capacity for liberation, for decolonization, right? For freedom and liberty, right? So that's the task at hand for us and for the up and coming generations. Off my soapbox, Cecilia, you have something to say?
I just wanted to ask if the reading of Hillard teachings, if it was translated.
Yes. So Isa Hilliard is a scholar. He's an ancestor now, but he was a scholar that became really popular in the 1990s. So himself, Larry Williams, and Naya Damali, they essentially studied the hieroglyphics of the Neter and produced this book, right? And I didn't kind of give you if you bought the whole book, like in the beginning chapter, they kind of explain that process. So this is literally them interpreting the hieroglyphs, the Neter and producing this book. And henceforth why they call it the oldest book in the world, because it's, if you look at the dates and when archaeologists are able to trace back these writings on the tombs, these are some of the oldest contrived writings in history. If that answers your question, it's a very good question.
Yeah, it was just because sometimes I read somewhere that sometimes in translation, the meaning can be like changed in a way. So yeah, that's
Yes, it's a very good point. So like in my PhD class, we're reading Fanon. A lot of Fanon's original writings were done in like French. So in the translation from English to French, from French to English, a lot of things kind of get effaced or missed just because the translation doesn't accurately or clearly translate. I don't know how this would play out in the sense of this book. You got to think too, it's not like it's from one language to another. It's literally from like a symbols to a language to another language, right? So even the translation is probably more layered from that regard. Any other questions?
What did your shirt say?
It says white supremacy versus gods. So yeah. So you can pick a side, shit. You want to be on the side of gods or you want to be on the side of white supremacy? Anybody else?
I have a question. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Is the slideshow gonna be put on the Google Classroom page?
I can. Let me do this. Let me get through the slideshow, and then if you guys like, I'll post it up. The only thing I had issues just because sometimes the size of the files are not always uploaded. But let me see what I could do, and let me just get through it first, and I can determine if we can post it up. George, you had a question?
Yeah, it's regarding the journal. So I was confused because so we're supposed to do a journal for every reading, or
Correct.
how does that work? Oh, okay.
Yes. So think about it like this way, George. The Ptah readings and the Egyptian proverbs, that's one set of readings, right? So you'll journal about all of those. So you don't have to do one for like the Egyptian proverbs and teach the Ptah. Whatever I signed for that week, you just journal for all of those.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then for next week, it will be the Ma'at, the moral principle. I think and the reason it kind of sucks because on my scanner, I can only do like 15 pages at a time. So I have to send so many copies. But all of those readings, you would just journal on all of them as if it's one reading. Does that make sense?
But like, what do you want us to write? Like anything that we're thinking or anything that we find
So what we discussed, because we're not really doing papers in this class this semester, we're going to try to use your journals to serve as practice for writing papers. So it's broken up into 3 paragraphs, right? What is the thesis, or what is the author's argument? What are they trying to get you to understand, right? Also, within that paragraph, what's the method? How do they go about getting you to understand what they want you to understand, right? Paragraph 2 is what is your analysis? Just as you guys were saying, this kind of made me think about the Bible. That's providing an analysis. So paragraphs 2 of your journal should be that analysis paragraph. And then the final paragraph would be how this relates to today, A, B, and C. So those will be your 3 paragraphs. That should make up about a page journal entry.
So far we only have 1 journal, or okay.
Yep. And then one thing to think about too, because we're not meeting in person, I cannot physically get the journals from you guys. So it would probably be better to type them out so that way you don't have to write them and then type them. If that's extremely difficult, the other option would be you could write it out and then scan it. You know what I mean? That seems like it would be more work, but just something to think about, because I'm gonna have to get those electronic and I want to make it easier for you guys instead of harder. Any other questions? Okay, last question for you guys of the last 2 minutes. This is gonna be for the most part the flow of our class, right? Breakout groups, conversations, fish bowls. The lectures are kind of gonna be hit or miss just depending on the subject matter. If we're not lecturing, it's gonna really be about getting into the readings and about me making the readings clear to you, right? So how do you guys feel about that flow? Anything that you would change, adjust, alter? Please speak now so that way we can make it, the way it needs to be. Cool?
I don't have any objections as to how today went.
Okay, so that'll be the flow then. I will see you guys next Tuesday. Feel free to holler at me if y'all need anything. I'm pretty good at getting back to you in email. Other than that, be safe. Yeah, be safe and be healthy. Peace.